Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to the top 20 conspiracy theories that actually turned out to be true. Now, I love, and I mean genuinely love, these kind of videos because I think most people have, certain beliefs that they can't really substantiate, they can't really prove, but they've got a strong feeling about it. I've got a friend who really believes in chemtrails. Have you guys heard of chemtrails? You probably have. To my knowledge, it's allegedly chemicals that are sprayed out of the back of aeroplanes, and they have something to do with the climate or controlling the weather perhaps. I'm not really sure, but my mate really believes in them. Obviously, there's no real way of proving or disproving them. I think there has been some scientists that have come out and basically said that it's not true, but how do you know for sure? But yeah, I'm sure you guys, as well as me, we have, I don't want to say conspiracies that we believe, but, just things that, we have strong feelings about that we just cannot find any evidence to back. So yeah, this video should be a lot of fun. And by the way, guys, if you enjoy my videos, and especially the movie reactions, please check out the Patreon. There's a lot of exclusive content on there and the full-length movie reactions. So yeah, definitely check out the Patreon, and let's get on with the video.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20
Why did he say that? Why did Nixon say that? He must have been involved in something.
Conspiracy theories that turned out to be true.
What I saw happen to the children of Kuwait and to my country has changed my life forever.
For this list, we'll be looking at the most shocking conspiracies that ended up being true. Some of them were covered up or originally thought to be fiction, but have since been found to be...
Syphilis victims in the US study went untreated for 40 years. Damn. What study?
Based in fact. Did we forget one of your favorite conspiracy theories? Let us know in the comments below. Number 20. Nazi officers tried to kill Hitler. Several efforts were made to assassinate Adolf Hitler during the height of World War II. Perhaps the most famous one is sometimes known as Operation Valkyrie, otherwise referred to as the 20th of July plot.
The Führer, Adolf Hitler, is dead. A group of radicals in the SS are attempting to seize control of the government. Initiate Operation Valkyrie.
Members of the German resistance planned to set off a bomb during Hitler's visit to the Wolf's Lair headquarters. German army officer Klaus von Stauffenberg managed to place the hidden explosive, but the result failed to kill the Nazi leader. The other part of the plot involved seizing control of the military in the dictator's absence. Despite painstaking attempts to account for every move, the operation was discovered, and the co-conspirators were largely executed.
The rest of you are under arrest.
No, General. You are.
The film Valkyrie brought a renewed interest to the complicated story of the failed plot. Number 19. The US Air Force.
Man, if only they were successful. I wonder how many attempts in total were made, on Hitler. Are we talking more than 5, less than 5?
Was developing a gay bomb. How do you slow down an impending army? Instead of dropping lethal explosives, the US military once considered an unexpected alternative.
I've seen this referenced by The Simpsons. There was an episode of The Simpsons where Homer is sat on a bomb that's heading for the floor.
Researchers considered the possibility of dropping a non-lethal bomb full of pheromone mixture on troops.
Whoa.
Although this idea never reached the battlefield, the theory was that soldiers would be too distracted by each other to keep fighting.
That you will not only be disinclined to fight, but you will be compelled to be having sex with the people around you.
It's especially clear that authorities were really reaching with this particular idea.
Do they really think that faced with guns and being killed, they're really going to choose sex?
This isn't to be confused with...
Could you imagine that? 1 minute you're like, brrr, brrr, brrr. Next minute you're like, hello boys.
the theoretical and equally confusing concept of
hilarious.
gaydar, which the Canadian authorities hoped would reveal people's sexual preferences. All the same, it's crazy to think that any amount of time was spent working on a gay bomb.
When the Pentagon says that they rejected this proposal, it's simply not true, and we have the facts to demonstrate that they've continued to think about it and to consider it.
Number 18. Operation Menu. The Vietnam War affected neighboring nations in Southeast Asia, such as Cambodia. Northern Vietnamese troops used the eastern part of Cambodia for resupplying an encampment during the conflict. This prompted a bombing campaign from the US, which targeted Cambodian sites operating along the Vietnamese border. From 1969 to 1970, this bombardment leveled much of the area. This action was hugely controversial, given the force and destruction unleashed on the Cambodians, along with the fact that the secret operation was conducted on a non-combatant country. It later inspired Operation Freedom Deal, which was an even harsher campaign that cut deeper into the heart of Cambodia. Details of this scheme were largely revealed in a declassification from the year 2000.
They can't impeach me for bombing Cambodia. The president can bomb anybody he likes. That's true.
Number 17,
Damn.
the U.S.
Did Nixon actually say that? Or was that just a line written for that movie? Because, I mean, that's pretty savage. The president can bomb whoever he likes.
worked with former Nazi scientists. Even though the Allies won the war and put many Nazi war criminals on trial, that didn't stop the U.S. from hiring German scientists. These experts were later integral in the development of the U.S. space program and other military improvements during the Cold War. Many of them had close ties and allegiance to the Nazis, making this entire operation all the more controversial.
There was, on the one hand, the truth about the program kept secret, and on the other hand, the idea that we'll tell the public that these are the good Germans.
The Soviet Union also conducted a similar operation in attempts to bolster their post-war staying power. One of the recruits for the American side, Wernher von Braun, is considered among the more important figures in modern rocketry and early space travel. Sometimes celebrating their achievements, the authorities also largely disregarded many of the subjects' connections to atrocities.
Wow.
Number 16.
That's truly fascinating. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Because on the one hand, you've got these people who were involved in some of the most horrific actions, in human history. But on the other hand, the information that they possess, the expertise can be used in, a positive, way. I don't know. It's a tough one. For me, it's the fact that they were paid, compensated for their, knowledge. That kind of rubs me wrong. Difficult one. Where do you guys stand on that one?
The business plot coup.
Well, somebody's trying to do something dark and treacherous.
Known as the business plot, this little-known conspiracy wanted to bring down the presidency of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Although this was a nefarious coup plot, the case didn't come to light until the testimony of retired General Smedley Butler. Butler asserted that he was asked to usurp the 32nd President of the United States, partly due to his support of veterans groups.
The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans, to use as a bluff or as a club at least, to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions.
Even with the general's revelations, some people questioned the veracity of certain details and the extent of the planning that took place. George H.W. Bush's father, Prescott Bush, has been linked to the plot, but it's still unconfirmed as to his ultimate involvement. David O. Russell's film Amsterdam is just one project that fictionalizes the events surrounding the scheme.
They're paying you to be their mouthpiece.
That's right, exactly.
And they know the veterans will follow.
Number 15, faked Gulf War testimony.
What I saw happen to the children of Kuwait and to my country has changed my life forever.
The Gulf War was a brief but notable conflict preempted by the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. The U.S. intervened.
This is related to Desert Storm, isn't it? I remember watching a few of those videos a while back, and it was truly fascinating.
Soon after, using a number of stories to support the decision, including the testimony of a teenager.
Withdraw from Kuwait or face a coalition ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
Yeah, this is definitely the event that kind of, Operation Desert Storm is what resulted as a response to what followed on from this speech, I think.
She was known as Nayira, and her account of babies being removed from incubators in Kuwait shocked and helped sell the war to American citizens.
Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying.
It became a much-quoted story for President George H.W. Bush and other proponents of military action. Later revealed to be falsified, Nayira was actually the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States.
No way.
She not only didn't see any crimes firsthand, but many details were generated by a PR firm.
No.
The case has become infamous as a deeply flawed attempt to sell the war.
I'm glad I'm 15. old enough to remember Kuwait before Saddam Hussein destroyed it, and young enough to rebuild it.
Number 14.
I can't believe that was faked. Unbelievable. She was so convincing. Like, you know, the first few moments when she was crying and stuff, my heart really bled for her. Like, I was really thinking, damn, like, she's never going to, you know, get over what she's seen. She's going to need so much therapy, etc., etc. Wow, what a phenomenal actress.
Tuskegee Study.
They were never told that they had the disease.
One of the most horrifying chapters in American medical history came out of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. A research study offered black men free health care in exchange for a secretive and unethical observation, withholding syphilis diagnoses from participating members. Researchers from health organizations such as the US Public Health Service attempted to study the effects of untreated syphilis without treating the patients.
Knowing that you were denied treatment and that you were lied to would affect anybody.
This also came at a time when penicillin was becoming a widely confirmed treatment for the sufferers of the disease.
And for the sake of science, they sacrificed some human beings. And it raised the question, did they really believe these men were human beings?
Not only was it a complete travesty perpetrated by the medical community, but it created a genuine distrust of the healthcare system among many people in the African American.
How could you do this, man? Like, I understand that you want to see what happens, but this is wrong. Like, on every level, this is just, and this isn't, I don't think it's because I'm, you know, a younger person, you know, with, you know, modern morals and ethics. I think that most people, the vast majority of people, would recognize that this is quite an evil thing to do to people without their knowledge. Like,
in community.
What the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
Number 13, Operation...
Listen, thanks, you know, good apology, Bill, but I don't think that's quite enough. I wonder if the descendants of those people, like, were given some kind of compensation. But even then, you know, money, it's not going to bring back someone who died prematurely as a result of that study. Yeah, horrible.
Condor. At this point, it's well known that the CIA had a large-scale and destructive influence on South American politics. Operation Condor was one such plan that completely altered the landscape of countries such as Argentina and Chile. By propping up dictators like Augusto Pinochet, the U.S. helped finance coups of various leaders across the continent. The actions that were supported by American intelligence groups created irreversible damage in these nations, and thousands were killed. President Clinton eventually declassified more information about the operation and its effects, bringing forth new details about the plans to delegitimize left-leaning political movements in the region.
Really?
In the decades since Operation Condor, its lasting impact is still felt in the countries affected.
El tema de la figura del sobreviviente, ¿no es así? Que es una figura bastante complicada, porque todo el mundo, la pregunta es de rigor, ¿por qué no te mataron a vos?
Number 12.
I just feel like, you know, the big countries, the US, the UK, Germany, NATO and stuff, I feel like we should just try and stay out of the affairs of other countries if we can. Obviously, if there's atrocities happening, genuine atrocities with plenty of evidence, you know, plenty of footage, not just somebody, you know, crying like that girl did, you know, to basically bring in the Desert Storm situation, like, then I guess you can justify it. But I think for the most part, we should just stay out of, like, you know, the affairs of other countries.
Bohemian Grove.
Unless absolutely necessary.
Rumors have always swirled about secret societies and country clubs where elites meet up to discuss world affairs. In the case of Bohemian Grove, this accusation is at least partly true. Many of the most powerful and influential American figures of the 20th century met at the California Club. The place was reserved for people like Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon, along with a list of businessmen and even Nobel laureates.
Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan had a talk there about who was going to run for president first.
And obviously Richard Nixon won that.
While one of their precepts involves leaving world affairs at the door, there's no shortage of evidence to the contrary. It was also the site of a meeting regarding the Manhattan Project.
The Manhattan Project was conceived at the Grove in 1942. The Manhattan Project, of course, is what led to the atom bomb.
The presence of many U.S. presidents provokes even more gossip about the other conversations that took place there. Number 11.
There's a movie coming out, I think, in a few months called Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. I think it's about the Manhattan Project. I'm quite excited to see that. Just at that time, I think it was the 60s when the atom bomb was developed. It must have just been a complete like game changer. Just the amount of like explosive power generated by an atom bomb compared to the previous munitions must have been huge.
The FBI spied on John Lennon.
They're after us because we talk about peace, you know. I mean,
when John Lennon moved to the US in the 70s, he became a target of FBI observation. His outspoken political beliefs were already controversial, and some US leaders worried that he would influence the next election. With stories swirling about Lennon's possible tour, which was an apparent attempt to recruit young liberal voters, J. Edgar Hoover put the musician under close watch.
Wow.
Not only that, the artist was threatened with deportation during this period. Republican Richard Nixon ended up winning the 1972 election, but the attempts to kick the singer out of the country continued until a court ruling in 1975.
when we approach people for help, somebody somewhere rings them up and says, these people are criminals.
Unsurprisingly, this wasn't the first or last person hounded by the FBI, as their COINTEL program spied on many citizens and political groups.
Secret FBI memos made public today show that the late J. Edgar Hoover ordered a nationwide campaign to disrupt the activities of the New Left without telling any of his superiors about it.
Number 10, Big Tobacco.
Yeah, it's just wrong. I don't know, like, people should be, you know, free to, like, make up their own decisions based on whoever, you know, if they like John Lennon and John Lennon, you know, at the end of the day, if somebody listens to John Lennon music, they don't necessarily have to share all of John Lennon's, you know, political leanings. Like, I don't feel like it was necessary for the FBI to get involved there. Or what do you guys think?
Tobacco's big lie.
There's extensive use of this technology, which is called ammonia chemistry, that allows for nicotine to be more rapidly absorbed in the lungs and therefore affect the brain and central nervous system.
Smoking causes lung cancer and a lot of other adverse health effects. Scientists demonstrated this definitively in the 1950s. However, public opinion wavered for decades, with sources springing up to generate controversy and debate. Some suspected that the tobacco industry was suppressing and distorting the facts through a coordinated campaign, and it eventually came out that they were. Together, the world's largest tobacco companies initiated Operation Berkshire to generate fake controversy and debate. Big Tobacco knew that smoking caused cancer and that nicotine was addictive. They decided not to make cigarettes less harmful because addiction made them a lot of money.
The work we did here is confidential, not for public scrutiny, any more than one's family matters.
You're threatening my family now, too?
Just goes to show, where there's smoke, there's often fire.
See how camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
Number 9, the FBI.
Man, it's scary what companies will do for the sake of profit. You know, it's actually crazy. They knew that their products were killing people en masse, like in big numbers, and they just, you know, for the sake of the bottom line, for the Benjamins, they were like, nope, we don't care. In fact, we're gonna spread misinformation to you know, to get people to smoke even more. Like, it's crazy.
FBI spied on political activist groups.
All power to all the people!
Those involved in political protests and other activist causes are often paranoid that they're being watched. And they should be, because it's happened before and it can happen again.
Tapes from the hotel rooms, FBI reports, those are pieces of information that we shouldn't have.
From the late 50s to the early 70s, the FBI engaged in illegal surveillance, infiltration, and disruption of protest movements and other organizations deemed subversive.
He realized how sick this country was. We were trying to reveal the truth about segregation.
These ranged from independence movements to civil rights movements to feminist organizations. They even had John Lennon, the former Beatles frontman, under watch. While this program, named COINTELPRO, was abolished in 1971, others may have taken its place.
This represents the darkest part of the Bureau's history.
Number 8.
For sure, other efforts have taken its place. You know, and these efforts, because of technology and how much better, like, things are now, like, it's probably way easier for them to go undetected. You know, I think people used to, like, know that their phone calls were tapped if they would hear, like, a clicking sound. Now, because everything is digital, I'm sure, like, they're listening. Like, Has this ever happened to you? You'll be talking about a product and your phone will be nearby, and then maybe a few hours later or a couple of days later, an advert for that product will appear on Google or on the internet, or it will find its way to you. I find that so weird. I genuinely feel like my phone is listening to me.
First female U.S. president. While the United States has yet to elect a woman to the office of president, by electoral college anyway, some theorize that a woman has assumed the duties of the office already. In 1919, President Woodrow Wilson suffered a debilitating stroke. This left him bedridden and partially paralyzed with some impaired judgment.
If I don't help him be president, what kind of wife am I?
For over a year, Wilson's wife Edith aided him in governing the country, to the point where she was basically performing his job in all but name.
Wow.
The degree of her involvement was kept a close secret, and Wilson herself denied that she made executive decisions until her death.
So he's like sitting there, and they like move his arm, and then they just release that to the press, and that's how dumb people were back then.
Number 7.
But hold on a minute. In the event that the president is unable to perform his or her duties, isn't it meant to go to the vice president? Like, why wasn't the vice president, kind of put into that position there?
The White Sox threw the World Series. The Chicago White Sox are on record for having one of the longest droughts between winning World Series at 87 years. However, they weren't always known for their bad luck. Back in the late 1910s, the Sox won in 1917, and they even had a wonder like Shoeless Joe Jackson on the team. Yet, rumors during the 1919 series held that the games were fixed. The White Sox lost the series, but the rumors persisted into the next year. Eventually, a grand jury found evidence that 8 players, including Jackson,
got 10 grand. But I guess 10 grand in 1920s money, we're probably talking about millions, right? But yeah. But even still,
though his role is disputed, were involved in a conspiracy to receive money in exchange for throwing the series.
I think the Black Sox players saw a high reward for what they were doing. They could make as much as their yearly salary in 1 week for fixing the World Series.
While a trial found them not guilty, they were nevertheless banned from the league permanently. Number 6.
I don't think it would ever happen today, would it? Baseball players are just paid way too much now. You would have to offer, players in the hundreds of millions or something, right? Unless somehow a really sort of low-ranking team makes it to the World Series and maybe the wage that they make isn't really that high. Because, like the top baseball players, they're making what, like 20, 30, 40 million a year now? Something like that?
Roswell cover-up. In the summer of 1947, an object crashed down to Earth in Roswell, New Mexico. Theories that it was an alien spacecraft have pervaded pop culture for over a half a century since.
Everybody thinks that Roswell was the first sighting of a UFO in the United States, and that's bull roar.
The U.S. Air Force claimed that the object was merely a weather balloon, only added fuel to the fire. And the conspiracy theorists were right. It was no weather balloon, and there was a cover-up. But it wasn't an alien ship either, probably. The object was a high-altitude balloon launched as part of Project Mogul. These balloons were intended to detect sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. During the Cold War, the U.S. military couldn't exactly be honest about that in the papers. Now, whether you think that's another cover story, well...
This better not be another damn... True, it could be. It could be sort of like a double bluff.
Russian spy job.
Number 5.
This reminds me, wasn't there like a story like last year where there was like a balloon over the US that I think it turned out to be from China, but then China denied it was theirs? Yeah, do you remember that story?
Scientologists infiltrated the US government. The Church of Scientology is infamously touchy about any criticism of their organization.
Get out! But I didn't mean anything by it. I don't even know L. Ron Hubbard.
Their influence over celebrities is well known, but theories about their influence over the government are also out there. And here's the thing. Scientologists really did infiltrate the government. In the 1970s, at least 5,000 members of the organization conducted espionage on government agencies and private organizations. And this wasn't a fringe element either. The founder's wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, pleaded guilty and went to prison. It was one of the largest scale infiltrations of the US government in history.
Wow.
All of this was done with the aim of destroying evidence that painted Scientology in an unfavorable light. It arguably had quite the opposite effect.
Boy, those Scientologists, they can be pretty sensitive.
Number 4. The
Scientology, I find it quite interesting. It's like, you know, because, you know, you got Tom Cruise, you've got other sort of big celebrities who, you know, believe in it, but isn't it just like a science fiction book? Like, I'm genuinely curious, you know, this is coming from a, you know, place of curiosity. Wasn't it just like a science fiction novel written by L. Ron Hubbard? Like, how has it become this kind of religion in a way? Like, or are people like Tom Cruise maybe using it as some kind of, you know, I'm not even going to say, but I'm fascinated to learn more about Scientology, genuinely.
The Watergate scandal. Perhaps the most well-known political conspiracy of all time, the Watergate scandal was unthinkable when it occurred.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook.
The scandal began when Republican President Richard Nixon's administration illegally wiretapped and broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters.
We don't know who ordered the burglary, and we don't really know what the burglars were up to that night.
Their aim was to acquire information about Nixon's opposition in the forthcoming election. The arrest of the perpetrators led to attempts by Nixon and his administration to cover up their involvement. However, mounting evidence and leaks soon exploded into a scandal that has become a byword for political disgrace, leading to Nixon's resignation.
One of the things that's so hard to recreate and understand now, looking back, is there was no sense that the president could lie to the American people.
Things have changed, Garrett.
Things have changed today.
Number 3.
Wow, to think that the president couldn't lie to the people. I mean, I think even the most naive person alive right now would concede that politicians probably lie on a daily basis to the public.
The government is spying on you. The common refrain for cranks and conspiracy nuts for decades has been that the government is watching our every move. And it's not completely wrong. With the rise of smartphones and the internet, the government has unprecedented access to information on its citizens.
They're following us.
In the wake of 9/11, the Bush administration initiated far-reaching mass surveillance programs, both foreign and domestic. The NSA's activities in the years since have included sucking up and storing online history, emails, metadata, text messages, you name it. Edward Snowden revealed a lot of this info with his leaks, including how other governments were also implicated.
Even if you send it to somebody within the United States, your wholly domestic communication between you and your wife can go from New York to London and back and get caught up in the database.
Few believe.
Snowden, man, that man, like, he's pretty much given his life, you know, to basically show how people, the governments really are kind of like spying on us. Because he is just, his life is just, as a free man, it's over pretty much. Like, where is he now? Is he still, I think last I heard he was in an embassy. He'd been there for like 7 years or something like that. Like, where, or has he been extradited back to the States? Like, what's going on with him?
That in the time since, governments have just given up. Number 2, false justification of war. In August 1964, the USS Maddox fired a warning shot as 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats approached the Gulf of Tonkin. After the torpedo boats opened fire, the Maddox sank all 3. 2 days later, the report of a second attack, known as the Gulf of Tonkin Incident, prompted President Lyndon B. Johnson to authorize further military action in Vietnam. For years, people questioned this justification.
At one point, the commander of the ship said, "We're not certain of the attack." Another point, they said, "Yes, we're absolutely positive." And then finally, late in the day, Admiral Sharp said, "Yes, we're certain it happened."
It was eventually revealed that the second attack was imaginary, based on wrongly interpreted communications intercepts. It wasn't the last dubious rationale for war. As we already mentioned, in 1990, George H.W. Bush leveraged false testimony crafted by a public relations firm to initiate the Gulf War. Over a decade later, his son would falsely claim that Iraq possessed WMDs to justify an invasion.
The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder.
Yeah, that was just a big one. You know, no WMDs found. Like, and they said, I think the number of Iraqis in that, you know, region that died as a result is like over 1 million or something. It's just crazy.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. The CIA conducted mind control experiments. The idea of a government agency trying to control people's minds might sound like science fiction, but it really happened.
Prostitutes would lure men to these apartments, and then once the men were in the apartments, they were dosed with LSD, and then they were basically studied by CIA scientists.
In the 1970s, a commission on the CIA's activities within the US exposed the existence of Project MK-Ultra, a secret program that used drugs and torture to manipulate its victims' mental states.
Oh my God.
Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
These experiments were conducted on prisoners in secret detention centers around the world, as well as within American universities, hospitals, and prisons.
The day that my father was brought to the hospital, they immediately put him on insulin to put him into like an insulin coma.
The CIA also funded brutal experiments involving electroconvulsive therapy in Montreal, Canada. Victims of MK-Ultra included Ken Kesey and Allen Ginsberg. It's one of the darkest conspiracies out there, and we still don't know the full extent of it. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from Watch Mojo, and be sure to...
Wow, my mind is genuinely blown, honestly. So much to digest there, so much. Like, the one that really sticks to me is the daughter of the Kuwait ambassador to the US giving that testimony, you know, so convincingly. You know, saying this, the horrors that she'd seen and witnessed. You know, if I was there and I was listening to that, I would be moved. I would be moved emotionally. I'd be like, damn, like what the, we have to go over there. We have to intervene. You know, the US does intervene, and it turns out that the testimony is completely fake. And I'm sure, you know, that knowledge probably didn't come until, you know, probably many years after the fact, you know, after, you know, the intervention was done. Very, very interesting. Like, you know, the amount of secrets and stuff that we'll never ever see public domain must be just vast. Like, just crazy to think what goes on without the public's knowledge. It honestly, it really, it is fascinating. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.